Link TV presents Mosaic World News from the Middle East. Here are today's top stories.
Iran condemns U.S. for deploying F-22 fighter jets to the Gulf. Israeli army attacks Palestinians near Ofer Prison. And Sudan rejects deployment of additional UN troops to the border. Mosaic World News from the Middle East begins now.
Iranian Defense Minister Brigadier General Ahmad Vahidi said that the deployment of U.S. F-22 fighter jets to the United Arab Emirates is a harmful move that undermines the region's security. The U.S. said the deployment was a normal adjustment of U.S. forces in the region, following their withdrawal from Iraq.
As part of its continuing efforts to arm and dominate the Persian Gulf region, the U.S. announced the deployment of F-22 fighter jets in the UAE. U.S. officials confirmed that the fighters were deployed in the UAE's Al-Dhafra air base. A U.S. military spokeswoman said that such deployment strengthens military-to-military cooperation, promotes regional security, and improves joint tactical air operations. Meanwhile, Pentagon spokesman John Kirby said the deployment was a normal adjustment of U.S. forces in the region following their withdrawal from Iraq. In its initial response, Tehran said that the deployment is a harmful move that undermines the region's security and stability. Tehran also called on the Persian Gulf countries to adopt a joint security policy based on regional cooperation.
We consider the deployment of U.S. F-22 fighter jets in the UAE harmful and useless. We believe the move is part of a psychological scheme aimed at disrupting security in the region. Joint cooperation between the region's countries is the only way to guarantee security in the Gulf. Foreign presence and intervention in the region will further aggravate the situation and disrupt security there.
The Iranian Defense Ministry called on regional countries to aim their military capabilities against the Israeli occupation entity, citing that new developments have emerged in the region.
Instead of collaborating with the US and its allies, countries of the region should direct their military capabilities against the Israeli occupation's entity and liberate Palestine. This is why the people of the region find their ruler's relationship with the Israeli entity repulsive. For its part, Iran said it's ready to boost its cooperation and ties with all countries, especially Islamic and regional states.
Observers believe that the deployment of U.S. fighter jets in the UAE is part of Washington's policy, which views the region as a market for its weapons, especially amid its economic crisis. The deployment will likely serve U.S. interests at the expense of people of the region, who are suffering from poverty, deprivation, and unemployment. According to reports, the U.S. military presence in the region is costing the region billions of dollars paid by the host countries' governments. Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, and UAE, homes to the largest U.S. military bases, are among the countries that spend the most on U.S. military presence. Qatar hosts Al Udeid and Silaila bases, which are among the largest U.S. military bases in the world. The U.S. used these bases to launch its attacks on Afghanistan and Iraq. The amount of money spent on the U.S. bases is adding a heavy burden on regional countries. Saudi Arabia has recently spent $60 billion on a U.S. aircraft sales deal.
أصيب عدد من الفلسطينيين ومصور صحفي بجروح.
A number of Palestinians and a photojournalist were wounded with varying degrees of injury during confrontations around Ofer military prison when the occupation forces crushed the demonstration. Dozens took part in the march in solidarity with the prisoners on hunger strike, especially those whose health conditions have deteriorated and are described as very critical. Based on messages leaked from the prisons, human rights organizations confirmed that if the Israeli prison administration does not respond to the prisoners' demands, the hunger strike will expand to include all prisoners.
The occupation forces resented the solidarity with the prisoners on hunger strikes in the occupation's prisons. They also resented the rising voices of prisoners who were transferred to the hospital at al-Ramla prison. As soon as the peaceful march, which included dozens, arrived at the gate of Ofer military prison, the occupation soldiers began firing rubber bullets, tear gas, and stun grenades to disperse the protesters. A number of them were wounded with various injuries. The march took off after a sit-in organized in front of the International Red Cross's bureau. During the sit-in, families of the prisoners called on the world to pressure Israel into responding to the prisoners' demands. In addition, they demanded the transfer of prisoners whose health conditions have deteriorated to specialized hospitals.
His temperature rose to nearly 40 degrees Celsius, and at 3 o'clock in the morning, he collapsed on the floor. Until 8 o'clock, the Israeli doctor who was on call at the so-called hospital of al-Ramla prison was cursing at him and spitting on him.
Human rights organizations confirmed that the situation inside the prisons, where more than 4,700 prisoners are held, is tense and on the verge of a storm if the prison administration does not respond to their demands.
Those who have been on hunger strike for over 50 days, such as Ta'ir Halahli, Bilal Diab, Omar Shalal, Hassan Safadi, and Al-Jafar Azzuddin, they are in a dangerous near-death situation. This is what the medical committee in the prison says, and they are trying to put pressure on them.
Palestinian factions have escalated their warning level to Israel to a threatening tone in case any prisoner is severely hurt or even martyred. Meanwhile, the Palestinian president affirmed his readiness to take the steps to refer the prisoners' issue to the United Nations. The prisoners do not demand anything other than freedom and a life with dignity. If that is not achieved, then they demand to be dealt with as prisoners of war and are trying to internationalize their cause. According to messages leaked from the prisons, their goal will only be achieved through unifying the internal fronts and mobilizing the Palestinian, Arab, and international masses. Jafar al-Budari, Al Jazeera, in front of Ofer military prison, west of occupied Ramallah.
Khartoum has strongly rejected the idea of deploying additional international troops on its border with the south. In addition, Khartoum took an escalated move, granting thousands of southerners stranded in the border state of White Nile 1 week to leave under the pretext they are posing a threat to Sudan's stability and security. Sami al-Shinawi reports from Al-Khartoum.
In the shadow of the war declared between North and South Sudan, and amid the diminishing chances of bringing them together, Khartoum's government responded with disregard to Juba's demand of deploying international troops on their border, adding that such deployment is a southern internal issue.
We accepted the deployment of international forces in Abyei because the region's status has not yet been decided. As for the other regions, we will not accept any deployment of international forces. If the South wants international forces, then let them deploy forces inside their border. We don't mind.
On the humanitarian level, more than 12,000 Southerners are stranded at the border port of Kosti. They are facing a humanitarian crisis that was further fueled by the confrontations raging in the region.
We hope that the government of the South finds a solution and helps rescue us. The situation is very difficult.
Sudan says that the presence of Southerners within its territories poses a threat to peace and security in the region. Sudan has set May 5th as the day for the Southerners to leave. In addition, Khartoum declared a state of emergency along its border with the South. Also, it cut off food supply lines and limited trade activities in a move that may diminish the chances of rapprochement between the two countries, as confirmed by the Sudanese opposition.
The Sudanese government has completely erased the history of its relationship with the South. It treats Southerners far worse than the refugees who came to our country. They deal with them in a vile and insulting way.
It seems that the relationship between the North and South is heading toward further strain and deterioration, which is diminishing any chances of rapprochement. This prompted both Juba and Khartoum to adhere to a policy of arm twisting, warning that the coming days may witness yet another humanitarian crisis that may force both sides to bow to popular demand demands, especially with both sides starting to call for better living conditions on each side of the border. Sami Al-Shinawi, Dubai TV, Al-Khartoum.
In Bahrain, Saudi-backed regime forces have clashed with protesters during May Day rallies there. Clashes erupted between regime troops and protesters in the village of Chubli, west of the capital, Manama. Thousands of Bahrainis marked the day across the country, including in the capital, Manama, and the village of Dair. Among the protesters were many who've lost their jobs for participating in anti-regime protests. They also called for the release of political prisoners, including rights activist Abdul Hadi al-Khawaja. The Manama regime has been crushing on the revolution since it began last year. Many Bahrainis have either been dismissed or indefinitely suspended from their jobs for taking part in the rallies. For the first time, the U.S. government has publicly confirmed the use of drone strikes in detail. A White House counterterrorism official says President Barack Obama wants to be more transparent with the American public on the issue. John Brennan says the targeted killings in other countries are legal, ethical, and proportional.
Yes, in full accordance with the law, and in order to prevent terrorist attacks on the United States and to save American lives, the United States government conducts targeted strikes against specific al-Qaeda terrorists, sometimes using remotely piloted aircraft, often referred to publicly as drones.
Obama's top anti-terror aide says the U.S. Constitution allows the president to protect the nation from any imminent threat or attack, and that the use of drones is needed to save American lives. He said the strikes have been certified as complying with U.S. law by Attorney General Eric Holder, among other top officials. He added that Obama's action in using the secretive CIA program was also authorized by measures passed by Congress. Brennan's remarks were interrupted when a member of the anti-war group Code Pink criticized America's use of drone strikes and accused the government of lying to people.
I speak out on behalf of Abdul Rahman al-Awaki, 16-year-old born in Denver, killed in Yemen just because his father was someone we don't like. I speak out on behalf of the Constitution, on behalf of the rule of law. I love the rule of law. I love my country. You are making us less safe by killing so many innocent people.
Analysts believe Brennan's comments reflect both a defense and a public embrace of drone technology in America's so-called war on terrorism that ranges from Yemen to Somalia and Pakistan. Washington claims its campaign of drone strikes targets militants, but official reports show that civilians are the main victims of the attacks. On Monday, a U.S. drone strike killed at least 3 people in northwest Pakistan. Islamabad was quick in condemning the attack, a reaction that follows the Pakistani parliament's recent demand that Washington must halt its controversial campaign as it is fueling anti-U.S. sentiment due to a high number of civilian casualties. In total, some 3,000 people have been killed in Pakistan in nearly 300 operations since U.S. drone strikes began in 2004. The question is how many more people will lose their lives before America's silent killers will stop being used to carry out bloody missions.
The Syrian Revolution's General Commission said at least 45 people were killed in multiple areas of Syria, including 9 people from the same family in Mishimshan village near Jisr al-Shughur in Idlib province. On the other hand, the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights confirmed the killing of 12 soldiers in clashes between regime forces and defectors of the Syrian army in the Basira area of Deir ez-Zor province. A regime soldier was killed in Mishimshan as well.
Activists said the mortar shells launched by regime forces killed 11 people from the same family in Mishimshan in the countryside of Idlib. 4 women and 3 children from the family were killed in their home. Also, 3 members of the Free Syrian Army and a sergeant from the regime's army were killed in that same shelling and clash, according to activists.
الله أكبر عليك يا بشار. هاي إصلاحاته. هذا الطفل عمره 5 سنين ايش ذنبه؟
Marat al-Naman in the countryside of Idlib was also shelled, leading to casualties, despite the presence of UN observers in Ariha city in the province, according to activists. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said a high-ranking officer is commanding a military operation in the areas of al-Basira, Kasham, al-Bu Omar, and Muhassin east of Deir ez-Zor. 12 regime soldiers were killed in an attack launched by the Free Syrian Army in al-Basira. At least 1 civilian was killed and others were wounded. In the countryside of Aleppo, Al-Atarib was shelled, inflicting immense damages on the town. In addition, civilians were killed in the countryside of Damascus, Daraa, Hama, Homs, Al-Raqqa, and Al-Qamishli. The violence continues in Syria. It has claimed the lives of more than 11,000 people, according to activists, especially during the bombardment. In this context, Agence France-Presse reported that an Islamist group, calling itself Al-Nusra Front, which was not known before the turmoil, carried out bombings in Damascus and Aleppo over the past 3 months, which resulted in the killing of dozens. As for the protesting street, its demonstrations continue, while the other side is maintaining the confrontations under the slogan of combating armed terrorist groups. Others continue their armed clashes under the slogan of protecting the peaceful demonstrations. The cycle of violence is never ending, despite the announcement of a ceasefire and the UN calls for all sides to cooperate with the 30 unarmed international observers on the ground to enforce the ceasefire. These developments come only days before the legislative elections in Syria, scheduled for May 7th. These are the first elections after the new Syrian constitution was adopted, which abolished the Ba'ath Party's leading position and allowed a multi-party system. It is worth noting that the bulk of the protesting opposition parties will not participate in these elections.
The future political process will begin from Parliament. It should focus on the turnout of the elections and exercise the elections on a larger scale, so that the Syrian citizens can completely cast their votes pertaining to Syria's future.
Damascus accuses foreign powers that wish to overthrow the political process in Syria of supporting armed terrorist groups to destabilize the country. Hayan Yaqub, BBC.
In the wake of Benzion Netanyahu's passing, opposition factions have withdrawn their no-confidence motions that were slated to be put before a vote of the Knesset today. The Kadima, Labor, National Union, and Meretz parties announced plans to delay their proposals to dissolve the Knesset for 1 week until the end of the 7-day mourning period out of respect for the Prime Minister. More in this report from IBA's Aaron Viner.
The moving up of national elections, currently slated for 2013, is becoming increasingly likely due to deepening rifts in the government coalition. 4 political parties have announced their intentions to submit bills to dissolve the government in 1 week's time. Foreign Minister Avigdor Lieberman announced that his Israel Beitenu party may join their efforts, depending on the outcome of debate over a new bill to replace the Toll Law. Legislation exempting ultra-Orthodox Jews from performing compulsory military service is at the heart of divisive issues threatening the ruling coalition. The Supreme Court struck down the Toll Law as unconstitutional last February, and it appears unlikely that a consensus can be reached over the new proposal. Lieberman says that he intends to submit his own conscription bill in 10 days that will mandate the drafting of all Israelis, religious, secular, Jewish, and minorities, into the army or national service. Lieberman wrote on his Facebook page today that he intends to put the interests of his Israel Beitenu party ahead of maintaining the coalition. Defense Minister Ehud Barak has also announced plans of his independence faction to present alternative legislation requiring Haredi Jews to serve 1 year of national service rather than the 3 years regularly demanded of Israel's young men and the 2 years demanded from the nation's young women. The Prime Minister met with members of the Friarim protest movement yesterday, who maintained that if the ultra-religious can evade the army, then only suckers serve in the IDF. Netanyahu supports the group and told them that, if necessary, the nation will go to early elections over the issue. The Premier is now investigating the viability of holding elections on August 14th or September 4th. Such a move would also necessitate moving up Netanyahu's Likud party primaries to June. Both opposition leaders, Labour head Sheli Yakimovich and new Kadima chairman Shaul Mofaz, welcomed the notion of early elections, although Mofaz said that it is unrealistic to hold them before the High Holy Days in mid-September. If and when early elections are held, the Finance Committee has allocated a 400 million shekel budget for costs of the balloting process. This is Erin Viner for IBA News.
The IDF has announced plans to add new security infrastructure along the northern border in coordination with UNIFIL and the Lebanese army. The IDF spokesman's office said today that the move is meant to reduce regional tensions and to bolster security. The army has already begun building a new barrier along the Lebanese border near the city of Metula. The structure is intended to obstruct gunfire from neighboring Lebanese villages. It's expected to stretch over 1 kilometer long and will be several meters high. Officials said the project will take several weeks to complete.
Several members of Israel's top intelligence echelon and former government leaders have rushed to defend former Shin Bet Chief Yuval Diskin. Former Mossad Chief Meir Dagan and former Prime Minister Ehud Olmert both echoed Diskin's sentiments that Prime Minister Netanyahu and Defense Minister Ehud Barak are misleading the public on Iran. Dagan and Environment Minister Gilad Erdan came to verbal blows over the issue at a conference in New York City. When the two were asked about the Diskin affair, Dagan expressed solidarity with the former Shin Bet chief, while Erdan fired back that the two were sabotaging Netanyahu's efforts to garner international support against Iran's nuclear program. At the same conference, Prime Minister Olmert charged that both Dagan and Diskin had contributed more to the safety of the country than anyone who is criticizing them for speaking out.
After 13 hours of negotiations, Iraq and Kuwait signed the minutes of a meeting held by the higher Iraqi-Kuwaiti Joint Commission in its second session.
Both parties also signed 2 accords, one stipulating the formation of a bilateral cooperation committee and the other regulating maritime navigation through the Khor Abdullah waterway. This comes as the Kuwaiti Foreign Ministry announced that the Kuwaiti Prime Minister will visit Iraq at the end of this year.
2 rounds of friendly negotiations between Iraq and Kuwait ended with the signing of a number of protocols and agreements. They include an agreement on the joint cooperation in finance, border, and political issues, and other protocols focusing on the marine movement in Khor Abdullah waterway, which will bring invaluable benefits to both countries.
The agreement covers marine movement inside Kuwaiti territorial waters, as stipulated in Resolution 833 on the demarcation of the border. The Iraqi ports are surrounded by shipwrecks in the territorial waters, which is impeding the movement of ships and boats. Ships passing through these waterways must raise the Kuwaiti flag. Again, it's hard to reach certain areas because of the sunken ships, so we agreed to form a joint committee to address these issues.
The agreements on bilateral cooperation were also the fruit of the high Iraqi-Kuwaiti joint ministerial meeting. It was a source of optimism after it focused on many of the outstanding issues and announced its commitment to solve them in the framework of bilateral efforts based on the immense desire to achieve this goal.
There was a Kuwaiti delegation headed by the Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister, in addition to the presence of economic and political delegations, as well as a delegation from the UN, including a team led by our brother Mohammed Abul Hassan, who is our ambassador and the former Minister of Information. He has experience working at the United Nations on agreements and border demarcation. Both sides have good intentions to resolve this issue.
God willing, we are anticipating the discussion of many unresolved issues. In addition, we will be able to solve or settle the crisis of Iraqi airlines, God willing. It will be a key to improving the relationship between the two countries.
It is worth mentioning this committee was formed on January 12, 2011. Its first meeting was convened on March 27, 2011. The people of Iraq and Kuwait expressed frustration with the status quo. As a result, both countries are now standing on the verge of a new phase in which a new roadmap is being drawn, as stipulated in the joint agreements signed by both sides. The future of the two brotherly nations is beaming with optimism. From Baghdad, Haider al-Boudi, Al Iraqiyya.
The views expressed on Mosaic are from contributing broadcasters, not Link TV or its sponsors. The production of Mosaic is made possible by grants from the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, the Wincoat Foundation, the Firedoll Foundation, and by support of viewers like you. Thank you. Watch Mosaic World News online. Stay up to date with breaking news, read our blog, get transcripts of past shows, and more at linktv.org/mosaic. Airwaves, a global channel of uncompromising stories, world news, documentaries, entertainment, and culture. Link TV, connecting you to the world. For more information, visit linktv.org.